known throughout the world for the quality of their wines, and the grandeur of these grapes has produced medal-winning Chablis and Chardonnay, Beaujolais, and Cabernet. Another fine vintage is produced at nearby Sears Point International Raceway, but here the accent is on racing instead of Riesling. If your tastes are like those of Scott Coletta, champagne is on order to celebrate an apparent march to a repeat championship. From the Hoffman fields, will winemaker Tom Anderson uncork a fuel coupe Chianti that will leave a taste of sour grapes in the mouth of points leader John Force. And at the Golden Arches Vineyard, it's brandy by bridesmaid Jim Yates, whose runner-up finishes have him fermenting for a win. The Sonoma Valley, located in Northern California, just outside of San Francisco, is dotted with lush green vineyards, belying its winemaking capabilities. But there is one other important feature on the landscape of this valley. It is one of the country's most beautiful racetracks, Sears Point International Raceway. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave McClelland, and we're here in this bright sunshine for this Autolite Nationals. And thus far, we have seen some tremendous action, some great performances in round one, and some excitement as well. It was Tommy Johnson Jr. in the near lane against Pat Austin in round number one of Top Fuel. Tommy Johnson Jr. had the ride of his life. Multiple wheel stands going down the racetrack. He was able to bring the car to a safe stop, but sacrificed the win to Pat Austin, who advances into round number two. Let's take a look at this again from the vantage point of the helmet cam mounted on Tommy Johnson's helmet. As he goes down the track, you'll see his helmet bounce back and forth as the car comes back down to the pavement. Again, a tremendous job by Tommy Johnson Jr. One, to keep the car from going over, and second, to keep it off the guardrail. There's also been some tremendous action in Funny Car, and Steve Evans has a look at some of the reasons why.
Mac, even though the heat has tremendous impact on the racing surface, not much on the racing engines. Because let's remember, it's that old West Coast cliche. It's a dry heat, plus we're right at sea level. So they're making tremendous power, which is why most drivers are fighting for control, having to work that throttle to keep the car hooked up. But a select few, like Tommy Johnson Jr., have more grip than they can deal with. Take a look at Al Hoffman in round one of Funny Car up against Casey Spurlock. It's Spurlock up in smoke, trying to deal with Hoffman, a huge wheel stand. The car comes down hard. Hoffman finally gets back on the throttle. Spurlock in hot pursuit. Can't catch him. Al Hoffman goes to round two, and both drivers were a little shook up when I talked to him.
I lost vision of the track as soon as I stepped on the throttle, but wind lights, pedaling, whatever it takes to turn them on.
The last few hundred feet, you could hear him coming, probably.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I didn't know where he was. I mean, when I hit, it dazed me. I really couldn't see where I was, and I seen he wasn't there. I got on it again.
That last hit, when the car really got sideways, it threw me into the roll cage pretty hard and kind of dazed me a little bit. You know, I kind of lost the race for us because I didn't get back into the throttle quick enough, and Al went by us, and it's my fault. It just about knocked me out, though.
We have to take another look at that Hoffman wheel stand, this time in slow motion. It's up, it's really up. Hoffman lifts, it starts to come down, he nails the throttle, and that saved the car. It would have broken the front wheels right off it had Hoffman not alertly got back on the gas. Let's go on board with Al. I guarantee you, under that helmet, there are some clenched teeth as he battles this thing back to the pavement. Now, there was another Funny Car in round number one that got a lot of traction, only he used it all to his advantage, and that was Whit Bazemore. Watch this. Bazemore has had so many problems in his long career. A 520 at top speed of the meet, 295 miles an hour. In round number two, in just a few minutes, it will be Whit Bazemore up against Chuck Etchels. And with that fine 520, Bazemore has a lane choice. He's never been more dangerous. In round two, Al Hoffman will go against Tom Hoover. What about the potential for another wheel stand? Well, it's huge because the engine in this car, Tom Anderson says, is too far back. They built it specifically for marginal racetracks. They can change it for Seattle next weekend. But right now, Al has to deal with a car that wants to fly.
Steve, we're picking up action in round number two of Top Fuel Eliminator, and it is the Corey Mack-driven McDonald's car out of Joe Gibbs Racing against the five-time Winston champion Joe Amato in the Team Valvoline car. Qualifying for this Autolite Nationals, one of the strangest affairs we've seen in a long time. A lot of cars had trouble getting down the racetrack. Our Western Auto Top Fuel qualified field shows Blaine Johnson for the 4th time this year. The #1 qualifier, Joe Amato, in the top 8. But look, Corey Mack, the best he could muster, was number 14. Shelly Anderson was on the bump. Scott Coletta comes into this race leading the Winston points chase, followed by Corey Mack, Larry Dixon. Blaine Johnson, our top qualifier, is number 4, and Mike Dunn in the number 5 spot. Both Corey McLenathan and Joe Amato had their fair share of problems in qualifying, but Corey suffered them the most. For Amato, he and his crew chief, Jimmy Brock, trying to make a comeback after a rather lackluster start of the season. And if their qualifying time is any indication, they may be on the move. A 4:87 got him in the number 6 spot. He ran 4:97 to beat Connie Coletta in the first round. Meantime, Corey Mack used all of his qualifying efforts and did not make the field until the final session, where he ran a 5:05. But good news for the McDonald's fans, he improved to a 4:93 at 300 miles an hour when he beat Rod Fuller in the first round. Amato, during qualifying, also ran over 300. Loss of traction in the middle of the race course. That cost Joe Amato a victory. 4:98 at 2:95. Corey Mack goes to the semifinals. ESPN Speed World coverage of the Autolite Nationals is brought to you by Allied Signals Autolite Spark Plugs. Guaranteed for 2 years, no matter how far you go. And by Pennzoil, the motor oil that works like liquid ball bearings. A giant crowd jammed into Sears Point Raceway for this Autolite Nationals. Stick around, more Top Fuel racing coming your way. The heat wave shimmering off the racing surface at Sears Point International Raceway near Sonoma, California at this Autolite Nationals. It is Top Fuel Eliminator round number 2, and folks, it is hot. We've already passed the mid-90s. The forecast 100 and higher here at Sears Point today. This is the La Victoria Salsa car, driven by Mike Dunn. His crew chief, Frank Bradley, giving him the sign, take it to the line. Dunn qualified 8th at a 4:90, ran 4:85, beating Larry Dixon in round 1. Blaine Johnson in the Travers Tool Company, Pietco's #1 car, qualified in the top spot, 4:84. He had a 4:95, being conservative in round 1. Johnson goes up in smoke while Mike Dunn goes 4:93 at over 300 miles an hour on a very hot day here at Sears Point. That is an excellent run. Watch again in replay. Johnson got a slight advantage at the starting line, but it was wasted as it was at about the 60-foot mark. He lost traction, and for him, the race was over. For Dunn, though, he was running on all 8 cylinders as indicated by that 300-mile-an-hour speed, plus a big win.
Well, Mike, you guys definitely had the balance of power and clutch for that lane.
Yeah, definitely. We just, you know, the heat of the day ran at 85 first round. We just wanted to try and run a 91 like we did yesterday in the heat of the day. And 93, that's pretty close. So, you know, it got us a win, and we'll see what happens next round.
And a big speed.
That big speed moves Dunn and the La Victoria car into the semifinals. Back at the starting line, here's the reigning Winston champ. The guy going for 4 wins in a row. He won a week ago in Denver. Scott Coletta qualified number 5 at a 4:87. Improved to a 4:84, beating Eddie Hill in the first round. Jim Head ran 4:87 in qualifying. He out-qualified Scott Coletta in the number 4 spot, but slowed to a 7-second elapsed time, losing traction in the first round, but prevailing over Robert Reel. The Smokin' Joe's car in the far lane, the lane choice going to Coletta. The quicker cars have generally selected the lane nearest the camera. A very precise procedure staging these race cars. Scott Coletta streaking to yet another round win, adding even more to his points total. Look at this. If you thought Dunn was good, how about a 4:89 at 301 miles an hour plus. As we see in this instant replay, Jim Head had a big reaction time advantage, nearly 0.05 of a second. But it mattered little when the American International Airways car built up ahead of steam. There's what 301 miles an hour looks like in slow motion, and another Final Four competitor is set.
Be honest about it, I didn't expect anybody to run an 80, but you did, 489.
489? Yeah, that's pretty good. We'll take it. Track was pretty marginal up there, and you know, sort of similar to, I guess, what we were at last week. So let's try and do that again.
Good news, you have lane choice.
Good. That makes a big difference.
Here it does.
Last week, the problem was the high altitude at Denver, Colorado. Today, it is the sunshine beating down on the racetrack here at Sears Point. As the temperature of the track reaches 130-degree plus, which it is right now, it brings the distillates, the oils, up to the surface and makes it very slippery. But it's a great day to be watching racing for the huge crowd jammed in to Sears Point. Here's Ron Capps at the wheel of the Roger Prim Racing entry. He qualified in the number 7 spot with a 489 and slowed to an 890 after Kenny Bernstein red-lighted in round 1. Pat Austin in his Castrol Syntec machine was the number 15 qualifier. His mark in qualifying, a 505, a 506 in the first round. You saw that a bit ago as he was against Tommy Johnson Jr. when TJ had those multiple wheel stands down the racetrack. Austin is doing double duty this weekend, as he does at practically every NHRA Winston event. He also is driving his top alcohol funny car in that category of competition. The lane choice going to Austin, and here we see him in the lane nearest the camera. Another of the strange races that has occurred here this day, as Pat Austin wins it with a subpar 548. Let's just say he lost traction the least. Our replay will show you Ron Capps giving it a valiant effort. As they left the starting line, Capps' car began spinning the tires immediately. A little bit later, Pat Austin did. Capps saw that. He got back into the throttle. This time, though, the car started to move on him and he had to lift. Pat Austin squeezed back on the accelerator pedal, and it propelled him to a 548 victory and moved him to the Final Four. Here's the first pairing in that semifinal round. Scott Coletto will pick his lane against Mike Dunn. And the other side of the ladder, we see Pat Austin up against Corey McClenathan. And Corey Mack gets to pick his lane. Down at the far end of the racetrack, let's go to Steve.
Well, Pat, as long as it says win on the time card, it doesn't matter what the numbers are.
That's right. You know, as long as we just keep getting more chances to get in those later rounds, that's all we're after. You know, it's funny, I learned something a couple weeks ago on my funny car about pushing the throttle halfway down after he shakes and smokes the tires. That worked that time. I recovered nice, and I thought I was going to be okay. I just put it about halfway down and held it there, and it just motored through like a diesel going through there.
That's experience paid off.
Every time you go down the racetrack, you learn something. Ronnie Capps offers his congratulations.